My blood turned to ice the second I heard my disabled daughter, Emily, screaming. I bolted outside and what I found made my heart stop. A busybody, Rachel Anderson, had my 7-year-old hanging from the oak tree in our backyard. "Those robot legs are such an eyesore," she sneered, completely clueless that I was the assistant commissioner overseeing HOA regulations. She was going to regret this, big time. And hey, before I go on, if you're watching the full video, drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from. Also, like and subscribe for more crazy HOA stories. "Mommy! Daddy! Help!" Emily's screams ripped through our peaceful neighborhood like a siren. I was on an important call with the mayor when I heard her. That terrified voice, my daughter's, froze my blood solid. I dropped everything and sprinted outside. What I saw next will stick with me for the rest of my life. There was my little girl, my Emily, dangling from our big oak tree, her tiny body swinging in the breeze. Her prosthetic legs twisted awkwardly under her. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she desperately clutched at the ropes tied tight around her waist. And standing there with this nasty, smug grin? Rachel Anderson, our neighborhood's head of the HOA. "Rachel, what the hell are you doing to my daughter?" I shouted, racing toward them. "I'm teaching her about property standards," she said, all cold and casual. She pointed at Emily's legs. "Those metal things are ruining the look of our community. She's been sitting out front where everyone can see her, and that's against Article 7 of our covenant. We have standards to maintain." I could barely believe what I was hearing. Emily's prosthetic legs, the ones she'd gotten just 6 months ago after a horrific car accident that killed her mother, were being called an eyesore by this woman. "Get her down. Right now." I barked, grabbing for my phone to call 911. "Not until you sign this," Rachel said, waving a piece of paper at me. "It's an agreement. Says you'll keep her indoors or only in your backyard." I've had complaints from 3 homeowners already. They don't want to see that when they're out for a walk. Emily was full-on sobbing now, her little fingers clinging to the rope. Rachel had somehow tricked my sweet girl into thinking this was some kind of special swing game. The realization made me shake with pure rage. "Do you even know who you're talking to?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous. "Some sad, new single dad who doesn't get how things work around Oak Hollow Estates," she sneered. "I've run this HOA for 15 years, and I'm not letting you lower our standards." As I quickly worked the ropes loose and got Emily down, I made a decision. I wasn't going to tell Rachel that I was Brandon Carter, the brand new Assistant Commissioner of Housing Regulations for the whole state, a job that gave me direct power over every HOA, including hers. No, I was going to let her find out the hard way. Later that night, as I held Emily while she cried herself to sleep, I made her a promise. No one was ever going to hurt her again. Her little hand traced the scars where her legs met her prosthetics. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice so small, "why doesn't she like my robot legs? I thought they were cool." Mommy would have thought they were cool too. God, my heart shattered all over again. Since the accident, Emily had been a warrior. Her physical therapist had even encouraged her to see her prosthetic legs as awesome robot legs, a way to help her adjust. She loved them so much she'd covered them with rainbow and butterfly stickers. I kissed her forehead and said, "Sweetheart, your legs are amazing, just like you. Rachel's the one with the problem, not you. And I swear, she'll never mess with you again." Once she was fast asleep, I headed down to my home office. I pulled out Rachel Anderson's entire HOA file. Before we even moved into Oak Hollow Estates, I'd done my homework. I already knew this HOA had a laundry list of complaints against it. Honestly, that's exactly why I chose this neighborhood. I wanted to see for myself just how bad it really was. But never in a million years did I think my own daughter would end up being a target. I stayed up all night going through every single decision Rachel had made over the last 5 years. By morning, I had a fat folder stacked full of violations, everything from illegal fines to flat-out discrimination against elderly and disabled residents. 3 days later, I showed up at my very first HOA meeting. Rachel was up at the front of the community center, going on about how important lawn maintenance was, when I walked in with Emily. The second we stepped through the door, the whole room went dead silent. All eyes were on my daughter's prosthetic legs, which she had proudly decorated with even more stickers after I told her there was absolutely nothing wrong with them. "Mr. Carter," Rachel said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness and a whole lot of disdain, "this meeting's for adults only. Frankly, after what we talked about the other day, I'd think you'd be more sensitive about parading your daughter's condition around like this." A few people actually gasped. One older woman even covered her mouth, shocked. "Actually," I said, loud enough for everybody to hear, "I'm here today in my official capacity as the Assistant Commissioner of Housing Regulations for the state." Rachel's face turned ghost white. "I've spent the last few days digging into this HOA's practices," I went on, pulling out my thick folder, "and I found more than enough violations to dissolve this board immediately. Maybe even pursue criminal charges." A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. I opened the folder and started reading off the list. Illegal fines, selective enforcement, discrimination against protected groups, including the disabled, financial mismanagement, and just recently child endangerment. Someone from the crowd called out, "Child endangerment? What's he talking about?" I took a deep breath and said, 3 days ago, Rachel Anderson tied my disabled daughter to a tree in our backyard and refused to let her down unless I signed an agreement to keep her hidden away from the neighborhood because, according to her, Emily's prosthetic legs were an eyesore." The room exploded in outrage. I hadn't said a word about it until now. I wanted to handle it the right way, but now, everybody knew the truth. "That's ridiculous," Rachel sputtered, flailing for control. "I was just trying to enforce the rules. The girl was in violation." I cut her off, my voice steady and loud. "That girl is a 7-year-old who lost her mother and both her legs in a horrific accident. Her name is Emily." An older man pushed himself out of his seat. "My grandson has a prosthetic arm after a military injury," he said. "Are you telling me he wouldn't be welcome here, Rachel?" A woman near the back shouted, "My mom's in a wheelchair. Is that against the rules too?" Before long, people were standing up all over the room, sharing their own stories, about how Rachel had bullied them over tiny issues, how she'd slapped them with fines, even how she'd driven a family out after their son got cancer and couldn't keep up with their lawn during chemo. Rachel tried to get the meeting back under control, but it was way too late. The community was done with her. "Effective immediately," I said, raising my voice above the noise, "this HOA board is suspended. All recent fines are frozen. A temporary committee will be set up to revise the covenant, and will make damn sure it actually follows state law and basic human decency." The very next day, the full investigation into the HOA officially kicked off. I put my best team on it, folks who didn't miss a thing. They started combing through every record, every complaint, every shady financial report. And what they found? It was even worse than I thought. Not only had Rachel been enforcing rules based on her own petty grudges. Turns out, Rachel hadn't just been abusing her power, she'd been embezzling HOA funds for years. When we dug into the bank records, we found nearly 75 grand of community money had been spent on her personal vacations, her fancy home renovations, and even a luxury car she claimed was for official HOA business. When the cops showed up at her door with a warrant for her arrest, I made sure I was there to see it. I'll never forget the look on her face when she spotted me standing next to the officers. Pure shock. "This is harassment," she screamed as they slapped the cuffs on her. "You're doing this because of that little crippled girl of yours." I stayed calm, looked her right in the eye and said, "No, Mrs. Anderson. I'm doing this because you broke the law. Several laws, actually. Child endangerment, embezzlement, discrimination. And that's just for starters." As they led her toward the police car, neighbors started coming out of their homes. Word had spread fast. Some folks clapped. Others just stood there, watching silently, finally seeing the woman who'd made their lives hell being hauled away. "You'll regret this," Rachel shouted at me from the back seat. "I have friends in high places." I smiled and said, "So does my daughter. Only hers are better." The legal process against Rachel took months. But during that time, something incredible happened in our neighborhood. Without her constant spying and threats hanging over us, People finally started living. Homes got a little more colorful. Gardens popped up everywhere. Kids played freely out in their front yards. A group of neighbors even launched a community project to make our sidewalks and public spaces more accessible for everyone. And Emily? She became kind of a local hero. People who'd barely acknowledged us before were now stopping by with little gifts, inviting her to birthday parties, bringing over cookies. One neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, a retired engineer, offered to design a special playground just for Emily, one that would fit her abilities perfectly. Another sweet lady, Mrs. Ramirez, was a seamstress. She made beautiful, custom covers for Emily's prosthetics, ones she could swap out, like fun fashion accessories. For the first time since moving into Oak Hollow Estates, we finally felt like we belonged. 6 months after Rachel's arrest, the day of her sentencing finally came. The courtroom was packed, mostly with our neighbors. And Emily insisted on coming along. She said she wanted to see the mean lady get in trouble for being mean. At first, I wasn't sure. But in the end, I figured maybe it would be good for her, good to see that real justice exists. When the judge asked if anyone wanted to make a victim impact statement, I about fell out of my chair when Emily raised her hand. "Your Honor," I said, leaning in and speaking low, "my daughter would like to say something, if that's allowed." The judge looked at Emily with kind eyes and nodded. "We'd be honored to hear from her," he said. I helped Emily up to the front of the room. Her prosthetic legs clicked softly against the floor with each step. She stood tall, so brave, and looked right at the judge, glancing briefly at Rachel's cold, stony stare. "My name is Emily Carter," she said, her voice strong and clear, way beyond her 7 years. "Mrs. Anderson tied me to a tree because she didn't like my robot legs. She made me feel like there was something wrong with me." She paused, took a deep breath. "My mommy died in the same car accident that took my real legs. She used to tell me that what makes people beautiful is how they treat others. Mrs. Anderson is not beautiful inside. She hurt me, and she hurt a lot of other people too, just because we were different." You could have heard a pin drop in that courtroom. And my little girl? She wasn't done. "I forgive her," Emily said, her voice shaking just a little, "because my daddy says if you hold on to anger, it only hurts you. But I think she needs to earn that being mean to people who are different is wrong, and that hanging kids from trees is very, very wrong." With that, Emily turned around and walked back to her seat, her head held high. I caught a few jurors wiping tears from their eyes. The judge didn't waste any time. His sentence was swift and harsh: 5 years in prison for embezzlement, plus extra time for child endangerment and civil rights violations. Rachel was also banned for life from serving on any HOA or community board, and she got slapped with a restraining order. She couldn't come within 500 feet of Emily or our house ever again. As we stepped out of the courtroom, a reporter rushed over and asked me how I felt about the outcome. "Justice was served today," I said. "Not just for my daughter, but for everyone who's ever been made to feel less than human by someone abusing their power." 1 year later, you wouldn't even recognize our neighborhood. The old HOA was completely dissolved. In its place, we built a community association that focused on inclusion and accessibility. Our very first project? A fully accessible playground right in the Central Park, with equipment that kids of all abilities could enjoy together. At the grand opening ceremony, Emily got to cut the ribbon. I stood there, watching her surrounded by friends, her prosthetic legs proudly on display instead of hidden away, and I felt this overwhelming sense of gratitude. What had started out as a nightmare had turned into something truly beautiful. After the ceremony, an older woman I didn't recognize walked up to us. "Mr. Carter?" she said softly, almost hesitant. I immediately tensed up, instinctively pulling Emily closer. She noticed and quickly added, "Please, I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm Janet Parker, Rachel's sister." I stayed wary, but listened. "I just wanted to apologize," she said, her voice cracking a little, "for what my sister did to your daughter, and to thank you." "Thank me?" I asked, genuinely confused. She nodded. "Rachel's been a bully her whole life. No one ever stood up to her, until you. She's in therapy now, finally facing her own demons. Maybe she'll learn something from all this. Then Janet knelt down to Emily's level and smiled warmly. Your legs are beautiful, sweetheart. They show how strong you are. Emily beamed and did a little spin, showing off the colorful butterfly stickers on her new prosthetic covers. They help me fly, she said proudly. As Janet walked away, Emily tugged at my hand. Daddy, is it okay that the mean lady got in trouble, but I still feel kinda sad for her? I knelt down beside my amazing little girl, once again blown away by her huge heart. That's called compassion, honey, I told her. And it's the most beautiful thing in the world. We walked home through our transformed neighborhood, past houses with bright, personalized mailboxes, gardens overflowing with wildflowers, and neighbors who smiled and waved, calling Emily by name. The old oak tree in our backyard, once a symbol of cruelty, now had a beautiful treehouse built into it. Mr. Jenkins had designed it himself, making sure it was completely accessible for Emily and all her friends. Sometimes, the worst moments in life lead to the most beautiful changes. Rachel Anderson had tried to hide my daughter away because she was different. Instead, she ended up making Emily the heart and soul of our community, a place where differences weren't just tolerated, but celebrated. And every time I see my daughter running across the front yard, her prosthetic legs flashing in the sunlight, playing with friends who see her strength instead of her scars, I'm reminded that love will always beat hate, and that sometimes the smallest among us can create the biggest, most lasting changes.